there are probably those who wonder what Pluto really is about. Usually you hear so many things. I can only speak for myself. Okay, so I have Sun Pluto conjunction, and usually it's about things like ego death and all that stuff. But I wanted to talk specifically about another gift that Pluto has given me. Okay, let's put it that way. It's an aspect of oneself. But anyways, so welcome to my channel. My name is Jose. For those who don't know who I am, that's my name. And I do micro astrology. It's a term that's not been used before, so I like the fact that it's being used. Or maybe it has, I don't know. But I'm coining it, and I'd like to use it because I work with over 150 asteroids. It gives so much detail into the readings. And it's just, I mean, we're talking anything like natal chart, I don't know, medical stuff, mundane, past lives, even predictions. Okay. Um, questions about paths and like success and love life and all that stuff. It's there. So yeah. But anyways, Pluto. Pluto is a big one because it's the planet of power, destruction, uh, power any way that's used, abuse, misuse, as does Judy Hall's terminologies or her concepts. But it's also about anything like nuclear war, nuclear warheads, nuclear weapon, nuclear energy, viruses, bacteria, fungi, rape, violence, slow progress, long, processes, healing, trauma, shadow work. Okay, just many things that it is. It's very much what it is. Death, of course, but death that's not always literal. Death you can't predict death. It doesn't matter. People, we have free will, but at the same time, yes, we don't have free will. Sort of like as you call it. It's not really what we see as that, but most and foremost, it is basically about power. If you look at the mythology of Hades, that's Pluto. Pluto, the Roman equivalent, is actually a little bit lighter than Pluto. I'm than Hades. So it's a little bit different. But Hades is basically the same story for that. So fears um, is one of those things that technically that is Saturn, but it can also be Pluto because it's what we are afraid of, and it's usually like I use things that we do um, that requires a lot of inner strength and inner like it's kind of like solitude as well. It's sort of like Neptune in a way to a certain degree, but it is past Neptune, so it's past the ego stuff. I'm also quoting stuff like from Stephen Forrest's astrology. Other astrologers have also talked about this. So one thing I noticed about Pluto is not so much about Pluto really. It's more about, when we say change, right? But what is change? From my experience, real change comes from when we literally surrender. I mean, pardon my French here, but fucking surrender to fear, fucking surrender through to the surviving mechanism and just really surviving, just like part of it's almost like this sort of unspoken kind of trust, and you have to die to it. That's why in Eastern philosophy or in the monks in Buddhism, there's this practice where they meditate and they practice themselves into what their death looks like, or maybe not look like, what it might feel like, and they really just surrender to it. And but you don't have to necessarily intentionally practice it, although it is good to practice it because it's good to also celebrate it. It's a bit of a Plutonian sort of thing. If you have, what is this? The Day of the Dead, that's Pluto. That's very Pluto. But Pluto in a way that is very the gifts of Pluto. When you celebrate death, it's almost like this transition because Pluto is really about regeneration and transformation and transmutation. Okay. So emotional surrender, physical surrender, mental surrender, um, energetic surrender, okay, psychological surrender, all of it. Um, so really, it's tied to trauma. But sometimes trauma is the reason I feel for myself, the reason I had trauma is because we get so complacent with something, and then we feel like that's what it is. Because humans, we love stability, we love certainty, we love like this whole, the four walls, right? We love having to know what's ahead of time. We love all those things. But what happens is that life itself doesn't work that way. Eventually, something will give, right? So, one of my coaches, Aaron Doughty, if you've seen him, you'll see his channel, Aaron Doughty. And he talks about, sometimes when you are surrendering, you can relax into it. When you know, let's say you're going to die tomorrow, you can actually relax because you're like, I'm going to die tomorrow. So make the most of it right now, right? I mentioned this many times. You probably heard this a lot of times, again and again. But I think it needs constant reminder. Like as humans, we need constant reminders because the ego is can go either way, unhealthy or healthy. I call it that way because an unhealthy ego. Uh, I this actually came to me wonderfully yesterday. An unhealthy ego has an existential dysphoria. Okay, it it doesn't want to be separated from everything. It doesn't want to be, excluded from anything, or rather, it doesn't want to die. So it doesn't want to be separated. It doesn't, but at the same time, it is, if that makes sense, right? It is separated because it knows only of itself, right? But that's an unhealthy ego. A healthy ego, on the other, learns to integrate itself as part of the whole, right? It's a healthy ego. It's an acknowledgement of the fact that we have an ego. That's a healthy ego. The other thing I wanted to mention here, the reason I'm mentioning all this stuff is because eventually, when it comes to surrender and being in the present moment, it's all tied together, actually, is that we get tired of playing the victim, right? There are people out there who still do play the victim. They're just like they're giving over the power. So they play the victims like poor me. So what happens is that the time catches up, or so-called time catches up. Energies in the world, universal energies, whatever you want to call it, the processes of life catches up with that. And then what we energize ourselves to, what we focus on, becomes kind of this habit. And then it manifests itself into physical reality because that's what we believe. But the moment we start changing that habit and becoming more conscious and aware of what we say, what we think, what we put in our mouths, what we put in our minds, what we put in our emotions, what we put in energetically, it becomes this sort of, it starts to change. And then universe itself catches up, realizes, oh, this is so. Then your actions start to change. The things you physically do, right? It's a thought. It's a thought. It's an idea that becomes a thought. That becomes an emotion. That becomes a belief, and eventually becomes action. Otherwise, it's not really manifesting, is it? Right? So it's this whole process. It's all the elements, right? It's we've lost so much of life itself. This is what Pluto came here to do. Pluto is just like, when I say came here to do, I mean it's not necessarily affecting us. It's a reminder of the toxicity that we went through of stagnancy. When you look at water that's stagnant, what happens with water that's stagnant? It becomes toxic, right? It becomes like, ugh. Have you ever seen water that becomes so stagnant that it's like you can't even swim in it anymore? Like your skin actually reacts to it because it's not healthy. That's exactly what Pluto is. Pluto is that, you know, but that's a reminder of the things that we cannot remain stagnant. There is stability to a certain degree. There's also change to a certain degree. They flow together, they're one and the same. Pluto is a reminder of that power is not ours to take. Power is already inside. So what's the rush? As Bashar puts it, we're infinite beings. So what's the rush? So it's this continuous thing it's just an intelligence. But part of that is death. Death is transformation. And I've had to learn through many times in my life. Like I mean, I don't know, maybe I feel like I don't have like hugely traumatic experience, like, loss of limb, physical injuries and all that stuff. But for me, it's a past life thing. So it makes me kind of wonder, it's like, is it even worth talking about this? But for some reason, I know what it feels like when I go through traumatic experiences, especially when I was younger. Trauma doesn't have to be always a shock. Trauma doesn't have to be like this, like, oh, it's terrible. No, trauma actually can be slow, insidious, and lifelong. We don't realize it's kind of like smoking, right? It's like, nah, it's okay, nah, it's okay, nah, it's okay. And then it becomes this habit. Next thing you know. So the same thing, right? So I mean, right now I'm going through some sort of, I believe I have a toxic, there's something toxic in the system right now. There's a blood flow that needs to happen. So going out more in the sun, and I mean, I eat only once a day, so I kind of sort of think it's like I'm not really getting toxic stuff. Yeah, but then there's a certain level of stagnancy that's not normal. When I say normal, I mean natural to the body. The body will tell you. It's also tied to the body. There's also stuff like getting used to work stuff, like getting used to the same habit. I have, so we get so comfortable and like, all that stuff with, but that's not it. Pluto will say eventually. Pluto is eventually. That's kind of its main, I guess you can say, logo. Like it's sort of its thing. It's like it is eventuality. Eventuality, something will have to change. It's not like Uranus. Uranus is all about the shock and change because it just happens to be right. But Pluto is, it's quiet. Pluto is like, if you look at Pluto way out there, right, past Neptune, Pluto is a silent thing. When you hear the word silent killer, that's also Pluto. So it's not being negative here. It's about facing the reality that, it's not even about like, oh, well, I don't want to have silent killer, so I'm going to do my best. It doesn't matter. Pluto is an aspect of ourselves that deals with this powerlessness, just sort of like, so when you give into the powerlessness, you realize there's actually power because you're trusting the process in itself. When I say trust, I don't mean like trust as in like, oh, I trust that everything will be always fine and dandy. Well, yes, you can, but eventuality, like I said, there's eventuality. Pluto is eventuality. So, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because I feel like when it comes to things like choices that we make, we have to really not have to, it's not even have to anymore. It's not an imposition. We're eventually taught. We eventually learn. It's like eventually. Okay. Something's got to give. Something that it's a violent thing when Pluto comes in because we haven't been paying attention. We haven't been conscious of it. I'm not saying like do things that are like, oh, we got to be anal about something. Let's do preventative measures. Let's go. That's fine. Take what you can, but don't push. Don't, we shouldn't have to uh, go towards that direction where everything has to be a specific way because we're so afraid of the so-called outcome. But the more we give into that, the more it's going to come anyways. The best you can do with this energy within is to accept and surrender. It's like surrender to the moment. That includes the surrendering to the moment of like the beauty that's outside. Because powerlessness doesn't mean that you're surrendering literally to the negative. But it's not about surrendering as in like doing nothing. No, I mean, your body will know what to do. Pluto is also tied, for me, it's tied to instinct. Maybe because I have trine, it's like Pluto is trine to my moon. That's an instinct thing. But Pluto is this whole like, I don't know what it is. I know how to work with toxicity, at least on a psychological level. And I've always I learned to sense things that many people that I've met in my life cannot. And it's just, one of the gifts of the other thing about Pluto is also this. I actually, I'll link it to this video. It's not really part of this whole make astrology fun again, but you know, fun doesn't always have to be like it's always exciting, and then we surrender, we neglect and avoid and disown and just kind of I don't want to deal with the negative. No, that's a negativity has a way to show us, has a lesson to show us because Gabrielle Bernstein says, and I've repeated this many times, not that it doesn't bear repeating, but she said, thank you. She has this prayer. She said, thank you for showing me what I do not want so that I may see or know what I do want. Mirrors, right? What we see in others is a reflection call it a test, so to speak, right? Of what works. It's funny because the part that I said test is there. It's funny because actually that's Eris. Eris is a test. But we're not talking about Eris today. We're talking about Pluto, but specifically about this idea that it's, so wherever Pluto is in your chart, wherever it is, that's the area of your life where you will get truth behind it. Truth comes out through Pluto. If you have it in retrograde, it means that there's that powerlessness. There's a lack of, you feel that you are not actually learning about your power, and it takes time. So you doubt your power. So it feels powerless, but it's a focus. Retrograde is a focus. Even Teal Swan mentioned this in one of her videos. She said, I forgot which video it was. And she says that retrograde is like, ooh, it's scary. It's like, no, it's a time of focus. When it's in your natal chart, it means it's the life of focus on that. That means it's something that you to really um, not focus on. Yes, it is focus, but it's something to also listen to. So, anyways, that's my little spiel for today. If you have any questions and your experiences with Pluto, if you've met people like myself who have Sun Pluto conjunction or Sun or Moon trine Pluto or Moon conjunct Pluto, I'm going through in my progression chart. I have a Sun, my Moon is conjunct my Sun Pluto actually. So it's actually, it's right there. So I've been feeling quite decisive when it comes to things, when it comes to surrendering to what is. And it's constantly being this test, also similar to Eris. Um, this test is sort of like, okay, how is this? Okay. So it's almost freeing to a certain degree to the ego, but it actually is because it means that you're rushing things. Remember that Pluto is slow moving, slow, slow, like glacial, at a glacial pace, slow. So, if you have any comments, if you have any experiences with Sun, Pluto conjunction, even just Pluto itself, what has it taught you? What is your experience with Pluto besides the pandemic? Okay, that was Pluto with Saturn. Um, what is your experience with that? Right. So, how else do you feel Pluto is to you? Let me know how it goes. Let me know in the comments below. And if you have any questions, yeah, write it down as well. And thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day. And please like and subscribe. Have a good day.